I was at Prince's autopsy, and what was missing from his body still terrifies me to this day. People think they know how he died, but what I saw on that table isn't something the world was ever supposed to hear about. It wasn't just strange, it wasn't just tragic, it was unnatural. And once you've seen something like that, you can't ever unsee it. I'll never forget the day they called me in. That's how this all started. Me, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the work I was trained to do, only to see something I'll never erase from my mind. I wasn't famous. I wasn't important. I was just one of the quiet people in the background, one of the ones who show up when a body needs to be handled, when reports need to be written, when death demands paperwork and cold procedure. That's the life I chose, and for years it was routine. I thought I'd seen it all. Car wrecks, fires, bodies pulled out of rivers. Even crime scenes are so horrific you'd think nothing could ever shake me again. But that day was different. You have to understand something about these kinds of cases. When it involves someone the whole world knows, the rules change. Doors get locked, phones get confiscated. Even the air feels heavier. You walk in, and you know right away. This isn't just another body. This is someone who meant something. Someone whose death will echo in headlines, in whispers, in rumors. And it was my job to stand there, gloves on, face blank, like nothing about this was unusual. I can't tell you the exact date. I can't tell you the names of the people standing beside me, or what facility it was. Not because I don't remember, but because if I did, you'd never hear from me again. That's how tight the leash is on this story. Even now, I feel my chest tighten just saying these words. What I can tell you is this. The building was cold that morning. Too cold. Not just the kind of cold you expect from steel tables and sterile air. This was something else. Something that crept into my bones the second I stepped through those doors. The kind of cold that makes you feel like you've just been swallowed by something bigger than you. Something watching you. They took my phone the moment I arrived. They patted me down twice, like I was a criminal. They told me, you speak only when spoken to. You do only what you're told. Nothing more. It wasn't standard procedure, not for anyone. That's when I knew whatever I was about to see, it wasn't meant for me. It wasn't meant for anyone outside of that room. And then there was the staff. Usually in these situations, people mutter, they joke darkly, they break the tension however they can. Not here. Here, everyone moved like shadows. Not a laugh, not a word. Just the shuffle of shoes on linoleum, the clink of metal instruments being laid out in perfect order. Their eyes didn't meet mine, like we were all pretending we weren't terrified. I tried to steady myself. I told myself it was just another job, just another body. But when they wheeled in that bag, the bag that held him, I swear the air in the room shifted. I felt it press against me, thick and invisible, like stepping underwater. The zipper hadn't even opened yet, and already I felt sick to my stomach. I'd grown up hearing his music, seeing his face everywhere. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was a presence. Even in death, he carried it with him. But there was something else, too. Something wrong. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but deep down, I felt it, like we weren't about to examine a body, but something left behind. Something that shouldn't have been left at all. I'll never forget the man stationed at the door that morning. Not the guard you'd expect, not some uniformed officer. This one was different. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed forward. At least, I thought they were eyes. But when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. His pupils were pale, almost milky, like they weren't really seeing anything at all. Yet he knew when I looked at him. I swear he did. He didn't blink, didn't shift, but I felt his awareness crawl over me like ice water. I looked away and didn't glance at him again. Not once. Still, that detail has never left me. In a room full of experts, full of men and women who had cut open hundreds of bodies, who knew every inch of human anatomy, who should have been calm and clinical, it wasn't the silence that scared me most. It was him. Standing there like an empty shell, like a warning. That was just the beginning of the unease. Because as they placed the bag onto the table and unzipped it halfway, the sound of that zipper seemed to go on forever. Metal teeth grinding open, slow, deliberate, echoing louder than it should have in a room that size. My throat went dry. My hand shook in my gloves, and I hadn't even seen what was inside yet. People think working in this field hardens you, and it does. But it doesn't make you immune. It just teaches you how to hide it. And I was trying, God, I was trying to keep my face straight, to look like this was just another day, just another job. But inside, something in me was screaming to get out of that room. Because I already knew. Somehow, I already knew that what I was about to see wasn't just going to haunt me. It was going to change me, and I was right. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I can still remember the sound of my shoes against the floor that morning. That sharp, hollow echo of rubber soles on tile, like each step was louder than it should have been, announcing me when all I wanted was to blend into the background. Normally, walking into a facility like that feels clinical, predictable. The air smells of disinfectant. The walls are too white. The lights are too harsh. Cold, yes, but familiar. Safe in its own way. That morning, though, nothing felt safe. I told myself it was just nerves. High-profile cases always came with pressure. You didn't want to mess up. Didn't want to be the one who left a mark where there shouldn't be one, or broke protocol in front of the wrong people. But deep down, I think I knew it was more than that. The tension wasn't just in me. It was in the walls. It was in the air. It was in the way people looked at me without really looking at me at all. When I passed through the first set of security doors, one of the men in suits scanned me from head to toe. No words, just a slow, assessing stare that made my throat tighten. He patted me down twice, once at the chest, once at the waist. The kind of touch that wasn't about finding anything, but about reminding me who was in control. Then he took my phone, slipped it into a black pouch, sealed it, handed me a small tag like I was leaving my coat at a theater. No smile, no reassurance. Just a gesture that told me I'd get it back when they decided I should. That was the first moment I felt stripped of myself, naked, even though I was fully dressed. I walked down the long hallway toward the room where it would all happen. The lights buzzed faintly above me, flickering in and out of rhythm. I told myself it was just bad wiring, that I was being ridiculous for noticing it at all. But every flicker felt like a pulse, like the building itself had a heartbeat. The hallway stretched on longer than it should have. At least, it felt that way. Every few steps, I caught myself rubbing my palms together inside the gloves, trying to calm the sweat I couldn't control. I kept telling myself, this is routine. You've done this 100 times before. There's nothing different about today. But there was. At the end of the hallway, a small group of staff stood gathered by the door. They weren't talking. They weren't even shifting. They just stood there, shoulders stiff, eyes down, like soldiers waiting for a command. Normally, in these situations, people whisper, maybe crack a nervous joke, share a look that says, "Can you believe this?" But not here. Here, silence pressed against all of us like a heavy weight. When the door finally opened, I felt it. That drop in temperature, that sudden awareness of the air being wrong. Sterile, yes, but not in the usual way. This wasn't the kind of chill meant to preserve a body. This was deeper, stranger, like walking into a cave where the sun had never reached. The room itself was spotless, too spotless even for a facility like this. Stainless steel tables gleamed under the fluorescent lights, not a smudge or fingerprint anywhere. Instruments laid out in perfect symmetry, every scalpel and forceps lined up like soldiers in formation. The smell of bleach was strong, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat, but underneath it, there was something else. Metallic, electric, a smell I couldn't place, one that didn't belong. I tried not to show it, but my stomach tightened. At the far side of the room stood the table, empty, waiting. A white sheet folded neatly at its side. That table had always been a place of finality to me, a place where the questions ended and the answers began. But that morning, it didn't feel like that. It felt like a stage where something was about to happen that none of us were prepared for. There were already people inside, technicians, assistants, a pathologist with his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He didn't greet me, didn't even look at me. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch in his cheek. I set my things down where I was told, moved into position, tried to slow my breathing. My hands felt heavier than they should have been, like every movement was dragging me closer to something I wasn't supposed to see. For a moment, there was a kind of false calm, a rhythm in the routine, gloves snapped on, tools checked, notes laid out on a clipboard. The motions were familiar, and for a brief second, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just like every other case, and I'd leave wondering why I'd worked myself up so much. But then I glanced at the others, the way their shoulders tensed when the door at the far end of the room opened, the way every head turned at once, eyes fixed on the gurney being wheeled in, and the way not one of them blinked. That was when I saw the bag. Black, sealed tight. A purple tag clipped to the zipper, a detail that caught my eye for reasons I still don't understand. Maybe because it seemed so deliberate, so intentional. That small flash of color in a room drained of everything else. The men wheeling it in didn't say a word. They didn't look at each other, didn't look at us. Just rolled the gurney to the table and stopped, waiting. The wheels squeaked softly against the tile, a sound that lingered long after they stopped moving. I should have been numb to it by then. I should have been able to watch without feeling anything. But as the bag settled onto the steel, my chest grew tight, my throat dry, and for a reason I couldn't name, I wanted to leave. I told myself not to. I told myself to stand still, to stay professional, to act like this was nothing. But every instinct inside me was screaming otherwise. And then, without meaning to, I glanced toward the door again. That same figure stood there, the one stationed as if he were guarding us. His eyes, if you could call them that, milky, unblinking, fixed straight ahead. He didn't shift, didn't breathe, didn't move at all. And for the first time in years, I felt my heart stutter. I tore my gaze away, forced myself back into the routine, told myself I'd imagined it. But no amount of self-reassurance could shake the weight in the room. Because I knew even before the zipper moved that something wasn't right. Something about that bag, about the air, about the way every person in the room seemed to be holding their breath. It was all wrong. And I hadn't even seen the body yet. Then came the real shock. The bag was still sealed when I felt it hit me. That gnawing sense that something wasn't right. Not in the obvious way, not yet. But in those small, subtle cracks that only show when you're paying attention. And I was paying attention, whether I wanted to or not. It started with the look. One of the men in suits, standing in the corner, glanced at me in a way that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't just watching. It wasn't just monitoring like they all were. His eyes narrowed, sharp, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking, as if he could hear the questions rising in my head. And then, just as quickly, he looked away. But it was too late. The message was clear. Don't think. Don't ask. Don't notice. I lowered my gaze to the floor, pretending to adjust my gloves, but my mind kept circling back to it. That look wasn't random. It was a warning. Then there was the door. At the far end of the room, opposite where I stood, a door I'd never noticed before was shut tight. Heavy steel, darker than the rest of the walls, with a keypad bolted into the frame. I'd worked in enough facilities to know the layouts, the flow of the rooms. But this door didn't belong. It wasn't in the schematics I remembered. And yet, there it was. Locked, sealed, untouched. What made it worse was how everyone ignored it. No glances, no acknowledgement, as if by pretending it wasn't there, it wouldn't exist at all. But I couldn't stop staring at it, wondering what could possibly need to be locked away so carefully in a place already crawling with secrecy. I forced myself back to the table, back to the bag. That's when I noticed the behavior shift. Normally, when a body's brought in, there's a rhythm. The staff move quickly but calmly, readying tools, setting instruments, preparing notes. Everything is efficient, clinical, automatic. But here, they hesitated. Hands trembled as they reached for scalpels. One assistant dropped a clamp and froze as it clattered to the floor. A small, harmless accident that in any other situation would have earned a chuckle. But here, no one laughed. No one even looked at him. It was as though the sound itself was dangerous, as though any disruption to the silence might provoke something none of us wanted to face. And then, the strangest thing of all, one of the older staff, a man with decades of experience, the kind of person who should have been unshakable, muttered something under his breath as the bag was positioned. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard enough to make my skin crawl. Not him. Not again. No one reacted. No one asked him to explain. It was like we were all pretending we hadn't heard it. But I had. And it sank into me like a stone, heavy and undeniable. I tried to steady myself, tried to focus on the job, but the unease kept growing, layer by layer. The pathologist cleared his throat, a tight, strained sound, and nodded to the men at the gurney. They moved in perfect unison, hands gripping the zipper. For a moment, no one breathed. The zipper's teeth clinked as they pulled, the sound dragging out like nails on metal. Inch by inch, the bag opened, and the air in the room seemed to thicken. I expected to feel the usual wave of finality that comes when a life is laid bare in front of you. But this wasn't that. This wasn't grief or sadness or reverence. This was dread. From the corner of my eye, I saw another glance, not at me, but at the locked door. One of the assistants flicked his gaze toward it, quick and nervous, before snapping back to the body. He didn't mean to. He didn't want to. But he did. And that told me enough. That door wasn't just locked. It was connected. Somehow, in a way I couldn't understand. It was part of what was happening here. I tried to push the thought down. I told myself I was being paranoid. That the looks, the silence, the odd behavior was all stress. All the weight of handling someone whose name would echo forever. But I couldn't convince myself. Not this time. Because the deeper into it we went, the more wrong everything felt. The air didn't just smell metallic anymore. It tasted like it. Bitter on the back of my tongue. The lights above flickered, faint but steady, like a stutter in the heartbeat of the room. And every movement, every step, every breath felt scripted, as if we weren't working, but performing. Performing for whoever stood behind that locked door. The zipper reached the halfway mark. The bag opened enough for the first glimpse of what was inside. Pale skin, waxen and drained. Lifeless, yes, but there was something else. A texture I couldn't place. Too smooth, too uniform. The assistants pulled back. The pathologist leaned in. The men in suits stiffened like soldiers bracing for impact. And me? My chest went cold. My hands started to shake. Because I knew, before the bag was even fully open, before we even began, that this wasn't going to be like any other case I'd ever been part of. What was lying in that bag wasn't just a body. It was something else. But that was just the beginning. I've done this enough times to know the rhythm of the room. There's a cadence to it. Prep, confirm, incise, record an old, cold song you learn by heart so you don't have to feel anything. But the cadence broke the second the blade touched skin. I knew something was off before that, before the first mark, before the first measurement. Because the pathologist wouldn't look at me. He stared just past my shoulder like there was a window behind me. Like he could step through it if he needed to run. His voice, when he finally spoke, sounded like it belonged to someone hiding under a bed. "Proceed," he said. Just that. No tone, no reassurance. Proceed. I took my place opposite him. The men in suits moved closer, not close enough to interfere, close enough to hear every breath. The others lined the far wall shoulder to shoulder like paint drying. I heard someone swallow. I heard my own pulse in my ears. I heard the hum of the lights, and I swear I heard something else underneath it. Thin, almost a whistle, like a wire stretched too tight. We began. First contact, the blade crossed the chest. It didn't give the way flesh gives. There's a certain resistance you expect, the living memory of muscle and fat and fascia that still pushes back even after life is gone. This didn't push back. It felt tense, dry, like cutting across old leather that had been left in a freezer. No seep, no bloom of dark red, no slow, inevitable pull of gravity. Just a line, no blood. Not too little to notice. None. I felt the hair on my forearms rise even under the sleeve of my gown. I could feel the suits watching the path of the blade the way people watch a fuse burning. The pathologist paused, his hand hovering just above the cut, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. He didn't say what both of us were thinking. He didn't have to. I adjusted the light. That's what you do when your brain can't hold a thought. You touch a dial, you find a task. The beam sharpened, the lines shone, not wet, not raw, almost matte, like the inside had been cauterized long before we touched it. But there was no heat, no smell, no steam, just absence. "Continue," one of the suits said, not a request. The Y incision is mechanical. It's not art. It's numbers and angles and habit. My hands remembered what to do, even as the rest of me wanted to step back and put the room between us. Each stroke made the same soft sound. Cloth on cloth, not steel on meat. Something was wrong with the sound. You don't think about sound in rooms like this unless it's wrong. We open the chest. This is where the body answers. This is where the cavities announce themselves and the map matches the territory. You see what a life endured. Old scars, silent infections, the hard work of a heart. I leaned in, ready to meet that familiar, terrible intimacy. There was the cavity. There was the space where a heart should be. There was no heart. Not removed, not cut free, not taken. It was as if the membrane had always been a shallow bowl and the bowl had always been empty. No vessels, no cords, no stubborn threads. The tissue that should have been a junction of miracles was smooth, pale, and wrong. A hollow. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The pathologist didn't either. He adjusted his glasses without touching them, like the act of seeing wasn't something he wanted to own. "Record," one of the suits said. The word cracked the air. I wrote nothing. My pencil hovered. How do you write? There's nothing. "Anomalous presentation," the pathologist murmured, barely audible. "Document cavity condition." I leaned closer. The light caught something the eye could miss. An almost lavender film feathered across the empty bowl, faint as breath on glass. Not fluid, not residue like we know it. It didn't reflect so much as shift when the light moved, like a bruise that forgot the skin it lived in. The humming changed. I swear it did. The overhead buzz sank a note deeper, and the thin wire whistle grew clearer. I looked up too fast and saw the locked door, steel darker than the walls, just be there, waiting. The keypad light blinked once, small and green, and went dark again. "Continue," the suit said. The same voice, like a metronome. We moved to the lungs. They weren't. The space where lungs announced themselves, pink-gray lattice, delicate and vast, was a collapsed emptiness that made no sense. No membrane architecture, no alveolar lace. Just a smoothness that was not a smoothness a body knows. As if holding your hands out to catch rain and discovering air has been removed from the sky. I felt a quiver in my knees and locked them. The room was colder now. You can tell cold in a room like this by the way metal speaks. There's a tighter ring when a clamp taps a tray, a thinner chime. The instruments had been singing that high, bright note since we began, and now every ring felt like it could slice. The pathologist's breath fogged the mask for a second. He set his jaw and reached for the sternum saw.
The suits stiffened as if bracing themselves against a wave.
The saw met bone. Except it wasn't bone. The first push should have grated, should have announced resistance you respect, the complaint of structure against intrusion. Instead, the teeth skittered and then sank with a soft, crumbly sound, like moving through compressed ash. No chips, no dust cloud, no scent you learned to despise. The blade dragged out a pale ribbon that wasn't marrow and wasn't anything else. It coiled onto the tray like a shed skin that never belonged to a living thing. I wanted to step back. I didn't. I watched the pathologist's hands. They held steady, but the knuckles were colorless.
We lifted the plate.
Underneath, nothing I knew. No branching vessels, no lace of veins, no glistening truth. A hush fell that wasn't human. The room's buzz shifted again. I felt it in my molars. The thin whistle tightened to a note I could almost, not quite, hear. My scalp tingled, a pressure that moved from the back of my neck to the crown like invisible fingers combing through hair. Document, the suit said. The same word, the same voice, but it sounded farther away, like he had stepped down a hallway that didn't exist. I took a breath. It tasted metallic, then like stone, then like nothing at all.
Please repeat the observation, the pathologist said. Voice even, eyes fixed on a point that wasn't the body and wasn't the wall. Survival sometimes sounds like professionalism.
The thoracic cavity presents without standard cardiopulmonary structures. My voice didn't crack. It didn't. No evidence of surgical excision. No hemorrhage. The word hemorrhage felt obscene. You can't bleed a blank. I glanced at the membrane again. The faint lavender was still there. It trembled, no air moved, no hand jostled. And it trembled like the after image of a plucked string. I thought of music in a way that hurt. The pathologist moved to the abdominal cavity. We are trained to expect certain anchors, the liver's heft, the stomach's curve, the braided logic of intestines. The anchors weren't there. The bowl was wider here, like a basin meant to hold something that poured out long ago. The lining had the same wrong knot texture. I couldn't reconcile what my eyes sent my brain. It felt like trying to taste color. Someone at the wall whispered, "No." Just that. A child's word in an adult's mouth. The pathologist's hand paused over the void. He didn't touch it. He knew. The way you know. Not to touch a live wire even if you can't see the current. A soft click sounded behind me. The locked door's keypad blinked again. My skin crawled with the certainty that if I turned around, I would see nothing at all and be more afraid than if I saw a person. I didn't turn around. He reached for a probe and lowered it toward the membrane. The tip hovered a finger's breadth above. The humming in the walls answered. It did. The overhead lights dimmed, not to darkness, but to the color of a storm. The probe touched. I didn't see movement so much as I saw the absence rearrange itself. A ripple moved through the lavender thinness, and the probe came back with a dusting that wasn't dust. The metal looked older where it touched, as if it had spent a winter under the sea. "Enough," the suit said. Not to the pathologist, to the room. The pathologist set the probe down with the care you use to return a borrowed thing you don't understand. There are moments when dread stops being a feeling and becomes a place.
We were in that place. All the things that make a person human were missing, not cut, not taken, not stolen, missing in a way that suggested they had never been there to begin with. And yet, we had a body. We had weight on a table. We had a face the world could name. I don't know what expression I wore, but the suit closest to me noticed. His gaze landed on my hands, then my throat, then my eyes, and his mouth tipped into something that wasn't a smile. "You will adhere to the report," he said softly, like a lullaby with teeth. "There will be no deviations." "What report?" I asked, and immediately wished I hadn't. "The correct one," he said. The pathologist made a small sound in his throat that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so thin. He reached for the rib spreader. The device slid into a body that resisted in all the wrong ways. The hinges opened without the expected music of bone. The sound that came instead was the whisper of dry fabric. I forced myself to study the face, eyes closed, mouth relaxed. The shape the world would recognize. I wanted to find an ordinary detail to anchor me. A nick on the lip, an old healed scar. There were none. The skin held no history. It was as if a life had been peeled away and the shell left behind. My lungs ached. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out slowly, quietly, as if the room would punish me for noise. "Measure," the pathologist said, and we pretended to live inside normal for another minute. I called out numbers that didn't comfort me and wrote them down. The act of writing made the world feel more real. Ink on paper, marks that would outlive the moment. I wondered if the paper would age the way the probe had. If the act of being near this absence would thin it, too. A tremor ran through the table. Not the building, not the floor, the table. Small, precise, as if something had exhaled beneath the metal. I looked up so fast my mask tugged at my ears. No one spoke. One of the assistants closed their eyes and didn't open them for 3 whole breaths. The humming climbed again. The overhead fixtures flickered back to full brightness, then dipped to that storm color, then steadied. The thin whistle wound itself higher until I almost caught it. It sat at the edge of hearing like a word on the tip of a tongue. "Proceed to cranial," the suit said. Each directive moved us farther from what we knew, and closer to something we didn't have language for. We prepared. The room had the stillness of a held breath about to turn into a sob. I reached for the instrument. My hands were steady. Training does that. Keeps your hands true when the rest of you fractures. I placed the first mark. The moment I did, the air changed pressure, like a cabin losing altitude. Eardrums twinged, and the lights gave a long, slow blink. The locked door's keypad glowed steady green for the length of a heartbeat and went dark. I heard the faraway squeak of a wheel somewhere down a hallway we weren't in. The pathologist froze, blade hovering. The suits didn't move. No one acknowledged anything. It was the first rule of surviving something you weren't meant to see. Do not say that you see it. The second mark, the third. The tool's tone changed minutely with each pass, ringing less like metal, more like glass rubbed wet with a finger. I felt the sound in my teeth. He lifted the section. A smell should rise then. Not pleasant, not ever, but honest. Nothing rose. The absence had a scent of its own, neutrality so complete it felt like an insult. I leaned in and saw it again, the faintest violet shimmer as if
Color itself had gotten stuck in the wrong layer of the world. I thought of stage lights and a voice that could fill an arena without shouting. I thought of a life that had bent sound and color and self into something unrepeatable. And here, on this table, the very things that make a body a home were gone.
A throat cleared behind me. The kind of sound you make when you want to shatter a spell and can't. I didn't turn.
The pathologist's gloved fingers hovered over the exposed space, not touching, measuring a distance between what should be and what was.
He whispered, not to me, not to the room. This isn't consistent with human.
He didn't finish. The suit didn't let him.
Record no anomalies, the suit said. Calm. Final. Proceed.
I met the pathologist's eyes. They were the color of someone who has seen a cliff edge crumble. Then the table shivered again. Just once. A tiny, unmistakable contraction, as if something inside the absence had flexed and relaxed, testing a boundary it no longer needed to respect. My mouth went dry. My heart stuttered. Then came the real shock. I thought I had reached the limit of what I could take. I thought the hollow chest, the absent organs, the lavender shimmer clinging to the cavity, that was it. That was the thing I'd carry in silence until my last breath. But I was wrong. That wasn't the moment that seared itself into me. That wasn't what kept me awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'm next. It happened when I let my eyes drift. Just for a second. I wasn't even supposed to be looking. The pathologist had stepped back. His hands shook faintly, and he mumbled something about needing to recalibrate his tools. The suits didn't respond. They just watched, patient as stone. And in that moment, when no one's gaze was on me, I looked closer at the body. I wish to God I hadn't. At first, it was the skin that caught me. I'd been avoiding it, focusing on the void inside, but now I really looked. And that's when I saw it. Lines beneath the flesh. Not veins, not capillaries. They were too straight, too sharp, too deliberate, almost geometric, like faint circuitry drawn beneath the surface, glowing faintly violet in the harsh, fluorescent light. I blinked, thinking it was my eyes playing tricks, but the lines were still there, curling in impossible patterns up the ribs, across the shoulders, down into the arms.
I leaned closer. That was when the sound came. It wasn't the hum of the lights anymore. It wasn't the faint whistle hiding in the walls. This was different. Closer inside the room, inside the body. A vibration, low and steady, like the strum of a guitar string no one touched. The cavity we had opened resonated with it, empty, yet vibrating. I felt it in my chest, like my own bones wanted to answer back. I staggered a step away, but the sound only grew stronger. The circuitry beneath the skin flickered, faint but real, pulsing in rhythm with that vibration. And for one horrifying second, I thought the body was about to move. I swear to you, its fingers twitched. No one else reacted. Not the pathologist, not the assistants, not even the suits. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they were pretending not to. But I saw. The left hand curled ever so slightly like a reflex, like a body remembering itself. And then the eyes opened. Not wide, just a crack. Enough for me to see the glassy stare beneath the lids. But they weren't lifeless, not empty. They glowed faintly violet, reflecting the same impossible shimmer from the chest cavity. Every thought in my head went silent. There was no science for this. No training, no protocol. Just me, staring at something that should have been gone but wasn't. The sound deepened, vibrating the instruments on the tray, rattling them until clamps and scalpels clinked together like chattering teeth. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, bending shadows across the room. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The eyes slid shut. The hand went still. The glow beneath the skin faded. The instrument settled in place. Silence. The others carried on like nothing had happened. The pathologist scribbled something onto a clipboard. The assistants adjusted their gloves. The suits didn't move an inch. But me? I was frozen. My pulse hammered against my skull. I wanted to scream, to grab someone, to demand if they'd seen it too. But I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come. My body refused to move. And in that silence, I understood. The thing on that table wasn't just missing organs. It was missing its humanity. Something had taken it, stripped it out, hollowed it clean. But it hadn't left the body dead, not completely. It had left something, a remnant, a residue, a presence that didn't belong in flesh and blood. That was what terrified me most. Not the absence, but the presence. That faint hum, that violet glow. It meant whatever he had been, it wasn't gone. It was still there, waiting, watching. And that's when everything changed. I didn't run. I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the floor, heavy as lead, like if I moved too quickly, I'd draw its attention back. My hands shook so hard I pressed them flat against the table just to steady myself, though touching that cold steel made my stomach twist. The pathologist didn't look up from his clipboard. He just kept writing, his pen scratching in steady mechanical strokes, as if he hadn't just watched the body twitch. The assistants avoided my eyes, staring at their gloves, their shoes, anywhere but me. And the suits, they noticed. Of course they did. One of them leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne over the bleach in the metal. His voice was low, measured, but sharp enough to cut. You didn't see anything. Do you understand me? Nothing. I nodded before I even realized I was doing it. My throat was too dry to speak, and the look in his eyes told me I didn't need to. He wasn't asking. He was making sure I lived long enough to keep my mouth shut. Still, I couldn't shake it. The glow under the skin, the hum in my bones, those half-open eyes. Every second I stayed in that room, the weight of it pressed harder, like the air itself was turning against me. My chest ached. My pulse raced. And all I could think was, I should never have been here. I should have walked away the second I saw the bag. But it was too late for that. When it was over, they closed him up. They zipped the bag shut, neat and final, like sealing a secret the world wasn't allowed to know. The suits whispered to each other, the assistants cleaned the tools in silence, and I stood there, frozen, useless, hollow. Fear settled in deeper than I've ever known. Not the kind that makes you scream. The kind that gnaws from the inside, slow and quiet until you don't recognize yourself anymore. And still, I couldn't stop staring at that bag, waiting for it to move again. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. Sometimes, late at night,
I swear I still hear it, that low hum vibrating through my bones. Faint but steady, like it never left the room. I see those half-open eyes in every reflection, glowing violet in the dark when no one else is around. They told me to forget, to bury the memory. But how do you bury something that isn't dead? If I vanish after telling you this, you'll understand why. Because whatever was lying on that table, it wasn't human. And I don't think it ever stopped watching me.